And do you think he's going to marry non-Nepalese? Are you kidding? Never happened. He could marry someone who's not from his culture. His parents won't talk to him. And if they do, they're going to be profoundly angry. They're going to put up with his nonsense for about 5, 6, 10 years until, like anything else in life, you got cancer, you adjust. If he was to go home with someone who's not from his culture, he's like cancer. His parents have to put up with his nonsense. So when someone gets married, that's what people in his culture do. And you know what happens? When you've spent time with someone, day after day after day, naturally, you begin to like them. And then you have kids. Not because you've examined what it means to be a father or a mother. That's what people do. What do you mean? I'm married once. I know. I've only been married once, but I'd like to get married more before I die. Please. This class is upsetting me today. Yes, one.
How do you know you're in love?
Oh, no, that's a great question. I don't mean to interrupt you. Oh, please, go ahead. Yes. Who?
No Messi. You said you watched No Messi when no one was That was his like companion at the age of 9. And they've been together since then. They're like, we're gonna have to separate for a couple of years. I gotta move away. And they found each other again. And it turns out they weren't meant to be. But how do you not such a young age that you have a companion there? What do you think about that?
You know, Lionel Messi is a good soccer player. But when it comes to his political views, social views, views on romance, trash them. He's just a good soccer player. You know. I don't mean they don't have the right to talk about the stuff they do, but, you know, they shouldn't exist in a philosophy book. They're just a soccer player. You know, in India, Middle East, China, marriages had been arranged for thousands of years. Arranged marriages. Arranged marriages. And they survive. People survive. Here, people fall in love. They don't survive. So then you have to ask yourself a question. Is it better to be arranged marriage or love marriage? When we talk about arranged marriage, you have to understand that you don't choose your companion, your parents do. We'll talk about that never. Yes, Neon, of course.
Actually, my mom asked me a question.
Your mom asked you a question. Why don't you just call her and put her on the line?
Yes, then she'll enjoy this. But
Not just call her. I'd like to talk to her. I'll give you extra credit. Come on. What's her name? Rhonda. What's her last name? Rhonda Dennis.
Oh, we all call it Mom.
Does she work? Where does she work? Okay. Why are you on your phone?
But, I'm gonna tell her that she's talking the whole time. Well.
No, I don't want to talk to her.
Oh,
I just want to say hello.
oh. Hold on. You're also like on the line with like the class too.
Good morning, Miss Rhonda Dennis. Are you well?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. You have a great son.
Thank you.
You should be very, very proud.
Yes, I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, he's a good kid. Good for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, he speaks well. He writes well. He asks great questions. Everybody in this class likes him except me.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm definitely happy to hear that. I tell him how important education is for me, so this is what makes me happy.
Yeah, well, good for you. You've done a great job. He tells me that you have a question for the class.
You asked me a question yesterday, remember, about love? Or, remember you asked me a question yesterday? Yeah, you texted me. You texted me. What is it?
I think I was just saying your timeline. Like, I you the person that you love that's not reciprocate the same feeling. I think when we were watching one of the YouTube videos, you were giving an example of, and yeah, the lady loved the man so much that she refused to institution. And when he got out, he told her that he just wasn't the right person. That's not what I was putting down in this kind of situation. So I just valuable asset.
Yeah. So that was it, though.
Thank you very much. It's really good to meet you, hear your voice. Once again, Neon is great. Thank you.
That's all that matters.
So, yes, what's your question?
I thought it was a question. I guess I'm misinterpreting.
Let me think of something.
Okay. Anything, Deontay?
That was good.
Yeah, okay. Natalie, how about you? Excellent. Neon?
Is there a correct use of targeted?
Not when you're young. I think when you're young, you are in this experimental mode. Everything out there looks really, really good, looks exciting, inspiring. And whenever you have desires, if you were to look at, for example, the Gospel of John, what God has is a desire. And eventually, any desire that you have wants to take a fleshy form. You're sitting home watching TV, AT&T all of a sudden is advertising a brand new cell phone. Okay? That inside you creates a desire. That desire begins to have a snowball effect. As you think about it more, your emotions become bigger and bigger and bigger. And then what happens is you pick up your phone to call your friend, and all of a sudden you begin to compare what the phone that you have currently in your hand with the one you just saw on TV. And then you begin to compare and contrast. And because the advertisement has given you a brand new image of a phone that looks really, really good, without really knowing, you begin to demonize the phone that you have. It's not good enough. I am much better. I can afford a much better phone. And then you walk yourself to AT&T. And then you have a conversation with the manager. You buy a brand new phone and you give your phone away. And that's how things work. Desires, if you have the proper resources, will eventually take a fleshy form. Imagine you like her, okay? Now that only exists in your head. As you begin to hear her talk and you begin to enjoy what she's talking about, and what you enjoy also creates a good amount of emotions. And then you want to kind of get closer to these emotions. How? You want them to be inside you more frequently, which means what? The only way that you can have those emotions is to be around her more often. And eventually you are. And then one day you're holding hands. That's how emotions usually work. So when you're young, because the world is like this humongous buffet, and you can be attracted to both trash and things that are of value. There is a shortcut, of course. And what usually happens when you're young and you just pursue ridiculous and nonsensical things, but you find them valuable, just wait until time passes, you realize how ridiculous you've been most of your life. What happens when time passes and you catch yourself that you have done just idiotic things most of your life, you will begin to have regrets. When they have asked most people who had been in a monogamous relationship and they had an extramarital relationship, they had an affair, and that affair eventually led them to divorce. When they go to those people after a few years and ask, what is your most biggest regret in life? They say, having an affair. I didn't need to divorce. Right? And because we don't really come with a manual, in other words, you have no idea if a school is good for you or not. And if I was to tell you, Nayan, staying in school is good for you, you're not going to listen. We're not the sort of animals that take advice well, unless you come from his culture. And even then, you come out quite dicey. So what usually happens with most of us is that you're left with a good amount of regret and remorse. If you catch yourself in time, and if your remorse has a good amount of baptizing quality or components to them, that is this fiery, and you feel like crap, and they get you depressed, and you become lonely, and you're able to kind of resurrect yourself from the ruins of your life, then you kind of are able to kind of think much better about yourself, about the things you want to do, and then hopefully make decisions that will benefit you as opposed to harm you. There is a shortcut. Regardless of what path you take in life, regrets are always waiting for you. Mistakes are always going to be waiting for you. You're always going to catch yourself having done something stupid. Okay? But, mistakes, it's like when I built, for example, houses, when I built sheds, rooms, you can make a mistake of cutting a 2x4, a wrong way. That's a mistake you can easily repair. But when you make a mistake of marrying the wrong person, majoring in the wrong field, hanging out with the wrong people, taking the wrong drugs, becoming addicted to the wrong things, you're paralyzed almost for life. Okay. Now, the shortcut is the following. Let me tell you two stories. There was a woman who had lived in the Albatraz tribe in certain parts of Africa. And in that particular community, what you have is polygamy. It's part of their culture. Men can have lots of women, women can have lots of men. That's how they function. Now, just because you've traveled to Albatraz, tribe, you can't come back to America and say, okay, I want to live like them. that's not your culture. You know, it's not going to fit well. So a woman goes to this healer and says, I want to have a child. And this woman looks at this young woman and say, okay, do not be intimate with any man for at least a year and a half. Instead of just jumping into bed with all these different men, observe abstinence. Don't have sex with anyone for almost 2 years. Then choose one guy that you like, that you think he can have the best of genes around all the people you see. Sleep with that person and you will get pregnant. And that's what she did. Right? That's a shortcut. Instead of not going to a healer and just jumping from one man to another in hopes of getting pregnant. And when you don't listen to the healer, what happens is you get to be 45, 50, 60. You say, man, I desperately wanted a child. I don't have any. My life sucks. Now,
You're applying it to being young and not making decisions about time and energy. A relationship?
no.
You also
But
mean like things you're doing.
everything. So it's an example I've always used and I will use again. He asks us good questions, you ask good questions. Everybody in this class asks good questions, which means what? Every single one of you in this class enjoy things that have substance. Okay? Now, how do you best use that talent so that it could benefit you in your life? Well, you can certainly major in math. If you have a talent for math, well, good for you. You can be a Stephen Hawking or a physicist. If, on the other hand, you're just doing computer science or economics or business because you want to make money, and yet you have this thing inside you that says, look for a life that gives you meaning and substance, purpose, identity, that you can look yourself in the mirror and like yourself. No, that's not everybody. Everybody desires to have a relatively good life. The problem is, look, you know, sometimes when you have the flu and you're coughing and it keeps you from resting or sleeping, what you do is you take NyQuil. At least I do, you know. And then you sleep really, really well and you just don't cough. Then once in a while what happens is you're not sick at all, but you can't sleep because you're restless, you're anxious about this or that. Say, man, I'm just tired of getting up from the bed exhausted. Maybe I should take NyQuil. Okay? All of us in this class want to have a relatively exciting life, but we become addicted to things that are not good for us. Now, Mike Tyson was consumed with a good amount of anger. One day as he's walking, he passes by this old man who used to hang out with Muhammad Ali. I guess his name was Costamado or something. And then he recognizes that Mike Tyson has the flair. He was inspired very much like Muhammad Ali. So he looks at Tyson, who was very young, and says, give your life to me for 3, 4, 5 years. Let me hone your emotions in a way that they can be productive in the boxing ring. You'll have fame, you'll have fortune. I can't much fix your anger outside of the ring, but I can certainly fix it inside the ring. Let's say you come to this class and your hand goes up and you ask questions. Every single class meeting. And let's just assume that I am like Costamado. I'm very good at what I do. I say, well, you know, this guy has a talent. So there are a couple of things you can do. Look at Mike Tyson, look at his talent, look at his anger and say, screw it. Let Mike Tyson be the way he is he'll end up in prison at the age of 16. Pay attention to Mike Tyson, become his father figure intellectually, he'll be a boxing champion. He'll make tons of money. Now, just because you become a boxing champion, it doesn't mean that you act like a champion. And just because you make lots of money, it doesn't mean you know how to spend that money. It just means in the ring, you're really, really good. Outside, you may be a scum, but in the ring, you're good. Okay? Now, I ask you, so what exactly is it that you want to do with your life? You say, well, I'm doing business. Business, why are you doing business? Okay? Or let's just say you say, I want to be a musician. Musician? Why the hell would you want to be a musician? I like music. I'll look at you and say, no. You want to do music? Fine, get your master's in music. But there will come moments in your life where your companion looks at you, your kids look at you, and they ask you questions. You won't be able to respond to them appropriately by playing music. You need language. You also need to know how to think well. I say, listen, you need to major in philosophy. Not any kind of philosophy, my philosophy. I forgot to tell that to your mom. You need to study in my kind of philosophy. And you need to get your master's. And then I'll say, once you get your master's, I'll get you a couple of teaching classes here. You can start teaching. Now, what you have is the best of both worlds. You're making money. When you're in the mood to create music, that's how you express yourself. That's how your soul comes out in music. There are times where you realize music is too small for your soul. You need a different vehicle. That becomes language. That becomes writing. That becomes thinking. That becomes talking. Okay? Because eventually your companion and life has lots of problems. And those problems are going to come to you, full force. Music is all about inspiration and excitement. No doubt there is some logic involved. There is some thinking involved, how to best put things together so that they can come out harmoniously. But to survive life, you need your thinking to be razor sharp. It doesn't mean you're going to be protected at all times. It doesn't mean that you're never going to make mistakes. You just won't make horrific mistakes. So, a good amount of success that hopefully you will have in your life is who's going to walk into your life? And if someone with a good amount of talent, who's a good coach, can walk into your life, will they see the substance that lives inside you? Will they be inspired enough, excited enough, have enough energy to kind of be your intellectual, emotional, spiritual father or companion so they can guide you, coach you? In the absence of that, you just got to wing your life and see where it goes. If you're lucky, then they'll give you this umbrella. You will live under this umbrella for a number of years. Once you become proficient, the person walks away. Let me tell you a story and then we'll go home. 'Tenzin probably knows the story much better than I, but just because he knows it better, it doesn't mean he can tell it better. So it's about this young man who is looking to see the moon. And he's been journeying for a long, long time. And then he's really, really exhausted because he keeps wanting to see the moon, but he can't. He doesn't know where to go, what to do anymore. And one day this old monk is passing him by, and he looks at the monk and says, I've been on this quest to find the moon for the past like 20 years. Can you help me? And the monk says, oh yeah, I see the moon all the time. I can take you there. He says, okay. And this is the thing you need to understand, that you can only be helped if you're desperate. If you're not desperate, if you don't feel helpless, no one can help you. It's not enough to be curious. It's not enough to be inspired. It's not enough to simply want. It's not even enough to simply need. Your need needs to be housed in desperation. Okay? So this kid, and remember how he gets to this place of desperation. He thought he could do it. That he could do this journey on his own to get to a place where he could witness the moon. It's called independence, freedom, imagination, fantasy. And time will eventually reveal to all of us that you're not sufficient enough. You're not equipped enough. You don't have the tools or the resources. And if you really have this desire to find the moon and look at it and be inspired by it, imagination is not enough. So eventually, he looks at this person and says, can you help me? And the guy says, yes. Now, this kid assumes that just because he has found someone, he can find the moon 2 weeks from now. But that's not going to happen. They go on this long journey. He asks this young kid asks this monk, so how does the moon look? What color is the moon? What is the shape of the moon? And this monk just says this or that, and just to kind of shut this kid up. And all of a sudden, after some time, the nature of the questions begin to change. This young kid looks at this monk and says, so, how long have you been a monk? Your robe is really nice. You smell really good. Do you know how to cook? Have you ever been married? Do you have children? And all of a sudden, you begin to realize the kid is no longer asking questions related to the moon. All the questions have to do with the monk. That's another thing you need to understand. There needs to come a point where your desire to see the moon goes away. You only desire to know about your companion, this old man. You can no longer be on a quest to find the moon. You can no longer be in love with the moon. You need to be in love with this old monk. He is your guide. He is your father. Okay? And it means you love him, you trust him, and you do exactly as he says. And as you spend more time with this old monk, something really interesting happens. You become devoted, i.e., powerfully attached to this old man. If you're not attached, you're not dependent, you're not codependent. Which means that when he says something, you just kind of treat what he says or who he is very casually. And then he won't take you very seriously. So we have this poem in Persian, بمی سجاده رنگین کن گرد پیر مغان گوید که سالک با خبر نبود ز راه و رسم منزلها. That if you go to a Buddhist monastery and your teacher tells you, steal that statue of the Buddha, you got to do it. It doesn't matter what the Buddha thinks. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. When your teacher tells you steal that statue, you got to steal it. Okay. So this poem is that when you stand on your prayer rug and you're ready to pray, but if your teacher says pour wine on this rug, and if you're a Muslim, you can't drink alcohol, because your guide says drink alcohol or pour wine on this on the rug, you got to do it without asking any questions. 2, 3, 4, 5 years pass by, and for 4 years, 5 years, the only questions that this kid is asking is, how did you become a monk? What does it mean to be a monk? How do you live as a monk? It's as if the quest for finding the moon has completely disappeared. See, students forget their purpose. Teachers don't. Teachers know that they're only a vehicle